Guys, so we are going to be talking about vaccines today and the side effects of vaccines, or doctor will tell us, but doctor's going to be joining us today because last time I was speaking about my journey and I was talking about what I went through, especially as a breastfeeding mother. But we got an expert today who's going to talk to us about things like side effects and adverse reactions, and we'll get into the nitty gritty of all of that. But feel free at any time to ask your questions and we'll get them going. But without further ado, Doctor, welcome. Thank you so much for chatting to us.
Good evening, Relebogile, and good evening to everybody who's joined us this evening.
So, Doctor, what do you do that makes you an authority to be talking about vaccines and all of those things?
Okay, I am a clinical virologist by training. Mm-hmm. I currently head the Department of Virology at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and the School of Lab Medicine.
What is virology? Some of us, our English only goes so far.
So virology is one of the specialities in medicine.
Yes.
A specialty that pertains to the diagnosis of viral infections, the prevention of viral infections and treatment. And part of prevention obviously includes vaccines. And that's part of my training, which is why I think I probably would know a thing or two about what we're talking about today.
Okay, so maybe it's a good point now that we have an understanding of what it is you do. Talk to us about, vaccines and specifically the COVID vaccine, because there's this belief that this thing just happened maobane and how all of a sudden, jiggy, there's a vaccine. Talk to us about, COVID itself and how far back it goes and then the development of the vaccine for us to be where we are.
Okay, thanks. And that's a very important place to start. So COVID-19 as an epidemic, which eventually became a pandemic. So epidemic means an outbreak and pandemic means it's an outbreak all over the world. Yeah. Started in December 2019. And by February of 2020, it had spread to quite a few continents throughout the world. And that was followed by the World Health Organization, the WHO, declaring it as a public health threat and as a pandemic. And since then, so I think since December 2019, when the first cases were described, until it was declared a pandemic, we are now in year 2 since 2020, yeah. I think by next year, Feb, we would have had completed 22 years of the pandemic being declared. So it's been quite a journey. So yeah, that is the disease itself. Yes. And then obviously it was a disease that came unexpectedly, caused a lot of trouble all over the world because of the ease of travel across it spread quite quickly, and because of that, and the whole world was susceptible because it was something that did not exist before. A lot of us were susceptible to it, and because of the severity of the infection, because we know it caused lung problems and breathing problems, and quite a number of people have succumbed to the infection. There was an urgent need for doing things differently to curb the spread of the infection. And also being a respiratory infection, it meant that it was very easy to spread because it spread through contact, it spread through droplets, and now with evidence that's coming, there is some suggestions that it even is able to linger in the air for quite some time, which makes it an easily transmissible virus, which needs to be stopped at its tracks. And the chains of transmission cut.
Let's talk about the virus itself. In relation to the vaccine. I've read in certain places that the vaccine itself has actually been worked on for a long time. We are only aware of COVID-19 now as it is. So it feels like a vaccine just was, came out of nowhere. But maybe chat to us about the development of the vaccine and how far back it actually goes.
Okay, maybe if we can just put it into context, before there was COVID-19, which is caused by a coronavirus, which was termed SARS coronavirus number 2. There were other coronaviruses. The common cold is caused by one of the coronaviruses. But prior to this current epidemic of SARS, there was SARS back in 2003. Which was the first SARS coronavirus 1. And I think 5 years later, there was also another type of coronavirus called the Middle Eastern respiratory virus. It's also a cousin of the SARS coronavirus. So these coronaviruses have been there with us for quite some time, causing the different types, obviously causing different disease spectra and severity of disease. But obviously these particular 3 that I'm mentioning, the SARS, the initial SARS, the MERS, and this current one, caused severe outbreaks and epidemics. And because of that, there was research that had gone into trying to come up with not only drugs, but also vaccines against these particular viruses.
And by drugs, if I understand you correctly, you mean treatment?
Yes. Oh, yes. We tend to use that term loosely. Yeah, medical treatment.
Yes.
Or antiviral treatment. Yeah. So, and then as far as vaccine development goes, vaccine development has been growing in leaps and bounds even before the advent of COVID specifically. So, initially back 200 years ago, the most crude form of vaccinating was vaccinating by injecting people with cowpox. Inoculating so as to induce some sort of immune system, but with the immune response. But with time, research has built upon, and the field of vaccinology and the science of producing vaccines has grown tremendously, which has allowed the speed of a vaccine entering the market or being available to be administered to people occurring fairly quicker than what it was traditionally. And that is why it appears as if this vaccine just fell out of the sky. There has been a lot of research that has gone prior to this, and it was very easy to borrow from lessons that were also used in the development of other vaccines to quickly tweak existing strategies of developing vaccines for the development of this vaccine.
So just so I understand correctly, when a scientist speaks research, give us context as to what that means, because many people like to say, oh no, I've done my research on the vaccine and, I'm not getting it. Or I've done my research and I am getting it, when basically they clicked a few links on articles or read some things on social media and they said, I've done my research. Can you clarify for us scientifically, what does research actually look like?
Okay.
What does it mean? What does it mean? Yeah.
Okay. Researching basically means finding an answer, searching for an answer.
Yeah.
To a question, which will obviously be a research question. When research is done with the purpose of introducing a new intervention, be it a treatment as in drugs or a vaccine, it goes through different phases so that it is safe, it is effective, and it is of the highest quality. So those are the 3 pillars that are very important for a vaccine or any drug that they must go through and pass before they can be administered to people as a prevention strategy. So prior to, these phases, we have what we call the pre-clinical phases and the clinical phases. The preclinical phases will be the phases that occur in the lab. So somebody comes up with a compound or a drug or a biological agent like a vaccine, and they think it is a probable candidate for preventing an infection in the case of a vaccine, or for treating an infection in case of a drug or an antibiotic. It is first tested in the lab. So it is there's culturing of, be it a bacteria or a virus, and whatever compound is tested to see if it really inhibit the growth of whatever pathogen we're interested in. If it passes that, then it goes through another phase of, okay, so it can kill this pathogen, but is it also killing the cells around which this pathogen is growing?
The healthy ones.
Yes, so that's the next phase that looks for toxicity. And this is still happening in the lab, in cultures or in plates. So it's not yet happening even in animals. After that, then it moves to animals stages. And animals who have similar immune responses to humans. The agent, be it a vaccine or a drug, is tested in animals to see if it protects these animals against a particular exposure. If it passes on that phase, still in animals, you can test two things. You can test whether the immune system of the animals responds and if the animals are protected. And once that has been satisfied that yes, it works and it is not killing the animals, then the next phase is the clinical phases. And even with clinical phases, we have different phases in the clinical stage. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So we also still start at the human stage in small numbers, still looking for efficacy. Does it work? And then also looking for toxicity. Does it kill the host? And that's why at that time, and we usually here use very healthy people and generally young, not very young, not extremes of age, fit and healthy people. And if it is shown that it works in small numbers, then it is incrementally given to bigger numbers now to see if this efficacy and this safety is also reproducible in larger numbers. That is where we have clinical trials, where we start recruiting thousands of people for a clinical trial. And in a clinical trial, you have what we call people who receive placebos or the dummy agent, and those who receive the active agent. The researcher does not know, is usually blinded to who gets what. A person just signs consent that they are willing to participate in a study, and then the researcher himself or herself would be blinded to who receive it. It's all randomized. We call these randomized clinical trials. The agent is given, and then the participants are followed up, and you can check of those that did not get the active ingredient, how many got the infection, and of those that got the active agent, how many of them got the infection.
Oh, and you mean the placebo?
Yeah, the placebos.
Yes,
so the dummy. And comparing then who gets the disease between those who got the placebo, the dummy, and those that got. So later on, there's an unblinding process. and you can tell who got the infection and who did not get the infection, and you can tell of those who got the infection how many received the placebo, how many received it. And that's how you can tell if a vaccine or a drug works. And that's where
so to summarize,
comes in. Yeah.
Yes, to summarize, then scientifically research is somebody actually saying, what does oxygen do when I put it with 2 hydrogens? It makes water. So the question is answered. So me clicking a link on Facebook of somebody saying water, sometimes when oxygen goes with, 2 hydrogens, it can be oros. That's not research. Somebody actually has to say, make it factual, say, this happened in a lab. We tested it over and over. Then we knew it was water. Then we brought a small group then we did the animals that drank it's water. Then we did the next group and we grew and grew and grew. Till we said, okay, kimeti. And that's the end of it. And the reason, obviously, that I'm hopping on about this is because sometimes I think it can be insulting to people in your profession when a lay old person like me is like, I did my research and this vaccine is not a good idea, because it's like, what research could I have done? And one of the questions that I was asking when I spoke about my vaccine journey last week was, what is it that can satisfy the layman that a scientist can even explain to you, that you can understand, to settle your mind? Because even as it stands now, I don't know what's in paracetamol. I don't know. But I take it. And maybe, not to, make light of people's fears because they are genuine. Maybe it's the fact that it's been around so long, you didn't need to question this, or you didn't need to question the polio vaccine or the measles vaccine that you received as a child. So in terms of what stage we are in, you've spoken about the clinical trials, and now it's at a stage where, it's just opened up to the teenagers, I think 12 to 17.
Yes,
where
12
are
to
we?
17.
Yes, so where are we in terms of the research and the efficiency of the vaccine? Because so many people say, I'm going to take it when this trial period is over.
Okay. So the trial period is definitely over for COVID vaccines, at least for those that have been authorized for use. After, maybe just backtracking a bit, after vaccines have gone through these clinical trial phases, that evidence is collected and it's presented to a regulatory authority. Each country has its own regulatory authority whose main task is to ensure that any agent that is introduced to the public is safe, is of high quality, and it works. So the agency is composed of, the regulatory agencies are composed of medical experts and scientists who are knowledgeable in that field and who are independent. And those people will then scrutinize or critically evaluate the evidence that is presented to them and make a decision based on their expertise on whether that particular agent fulfills the criteria of safety, efficacy, and of quality. And once it has been authorized, if it passes those criteria, it then is registered for use. And also you do get a registration for trial. So so when something has never existed before and it's coming for the first time, and a clinical trial needs to be done, you do get that trial registration. But as far as COVID-19 vaccines go, we are already past that phase of trials for quite a few of the vaccines. There are still others further down in the pipeline that are coming along. But those that have been registered specifically in our country would have gone through the clinical trial phase. So it's no longer a clinical trial, it is now licensure. So they've been licensed to be used for the intended purpose.
So somebody was asking earlier, they were saying, does this only happen in labs abroad, or are there labs that are actively doing clinical trials and all of these testings on vaccinations in overseas, in South Africa, sorry.
Okay.
Do they also happen in South Africa?
Yes, so clinical trials where the vaccine is tested in humans happens all over the world. South Africa was very involved in clinical trials of quite a few of the vaccines that have been registered in our country. Also, South Africa is very active in basic research. Although there isn't yet a vaccine that has come out of South Africa that is registered yet, but South Africa is involved in different parts of the value chain. It may be the lab investigations that test for efficacy. Some of them may have been done in South Africa, or it may be, specifically efficacy type of lab research may have been done in South Africa. So yes, some research is done in South Africa, and clinical trials generally are multi-center and multi-country. So you would find the same drug is tested in different populations across the world simultaneously. And that's why you'll get thousands of people's data being presented for a drug to be registered. Yeah.
Okay, so now let's get to the part of obviously talking about side effects and things like that. On a very basic level, and I'll use the paracetamol example, is there any medication, no matter how simple or easy to get over the counter, that is without side effects?
No. So in medicine, we have the rule that nothing is 100% and nothing is fail-proof, and nothing works 100% of the time.
Can I ask why? Can I ask why? Because somebody might be thinking, and I know you said medicine, but somebody might be thinking, should science not be 100%? And I'm completely excluding the conversations that we have about miracles and God intervening. We know those stories that a person can be told by every single doctor, listen, you don't have longer than X to live, and they live. So outside of those, why is it in medicine that nothing is fail-proof?
Because there are too many variables. For starters, people are different. People respond differently. You and I may be in the same room with a person with flu. You catch the flu, I don't catch the flu. People respond differently. And that's a very big variable. So I think that's the main thing, that people respond differently because they have different constitutions. People have different immune responses. People have different genetic makeups. So there is never a uniform response, even to a same exposure to a same trigger. And that is why, depending on how a person responds, you do not expect something to work 100% all the time. And that is generally the role, yeah.
So now let's talk then about the vaccine itself and the side effects. And actually, if it's still being classified as side effects, or as some say, adverse reactions, from my side, I was open about it to say, I was scared when I did my first vaccine. I posed for a picture, but please know I was scared for a number of reasons. One of them being I was afraid of getting sick because of the vaccine. And I don't mean sick as in I was afraid of the vaccine giving me COVID, as in I was afraid of getting flu-like symptoms. I'm a nursing mother. I'm a working mom. I don't actually have space in my life to be getting sick, even though I'm a little bit sick at the moment. And for me, that was one of the fears, but I went ahead and did it anyway, spoke to my doctor because I needed reassurance about the fact that I'm breastfeeding. Fortunately for me, the only thing I experienced was a sore arm. And I'd already been told, keep your vitamin intake high if you can, vitamin C, zinc, B, Co, X, Y, and Z. So I did all of the things, but that was one of my fears, is that even though I have confidence in the vaccine, I'm afraid that nothing is without its, like you said, nothing is fail-proof. So talk to us then about the conversation around side effects and adverse reactions. And then we can go to that elephant in the room of people saying, "Ebola, people have died," you know.
Okay. So part of the regulatory process is as we go through clinical trials, evidence comes up. And during a clinical trial, there is a meticulous record of what happens when a vaccine or a drug is given. And those are recorded and they are graded according to their severity. Is it a discomfort? Is it pain? Is it mild, or is it severe, or is it really serious event that would basically nullify the use of that particular agent? So the World Health Organization came up with this guiding document specifically for vaccines, because we're talking about vaccines today, which looks at the whole adverse event collection of things that may happen. We call them adverse events following immunization, which basically means any untoward medical problem or health problem that may occur following immunization. Full stop. It may or may not have causal relationship. It may not be caused by the vaccine itself, but what's important is its occurrence in relation to the administration of a vaccine. So, and that is then termed an adverse events following immunization. Then these are ranked according to how they came about and how bad they were. So from how they came about, it can be during clinical trials, it was established conclusively, and there was a causal link to when this vaccine is taken, this is what happens. They are then called vaccine product related reactions, and side effects fit in that category. We also have something called vaccination process itself related reaction. We have what we call coincidental.
Does that mean, can I just ask, does that mean vaccination process reactions? Does that mean, for example, the fact that a needle is going into your body, you might get, so it's not actually the vaccine itself, it's anything that was getting the vaccine into your body?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, or it can be coincidental, because life happens even when a vaccine is given. Things happen coincidentally, so it's categorized as that. Or it may be something called immunization anxiety reaction, because that is also has been identified as a real occurrence. So
please explain what that means, because I would guess that you are saying immunization anxiety is a person goes there and they are just nervous as hell, and because the anxiety can actually manifest itself physically, like let's say some people sweat a lot, or maybe you get a runny tummy, and it happens to fall at the same time that you're getting that vaccine. Now you say it's for mala, but however, okay.
And typical examples of immunization anxiety related reactions are things like hyperventilation, sort of fainting. Those are the two typical ones that tend to be related to we call them vasovagal, or just the body reacting nervously, fight or flight type of reaction. Those that are vaccine product related, generally side effects would fall into that, because firstly, they would have been established during clinical trials that yes, there will be a fever, there will be a headache, there may be whatever list of things that may happen, a rash, and all reactions, and they are graded according, obviously, to how bad they are. mild ones, and also how long they last. Generally, side effects tend to be transient, so they usually are self-limiting. Within 2 to 3 days, they are gone. And common ones for vaccines specifically would be a fever or high temperature, pain in the site of the vaccine where the inoculation occurred, headaches, what else? Body pains, because remember how a vaccine works. A vaccine works by duping your body to think that an infection has entered. And how a body responds is by launching its immune response. And when it launches that immune response, it triggers those pathways where you get fever, where you get pain, and that's usually a normal physiological thing, a healthy thing that happens as part of the body's response whenever something foreign is introduced. But obviously the difference here is the foreign thing is not disease causing. It mimics something that is disease causing, but the immune system...
I need you to repeat that. I need you to repeat that, because I think it's so important, because some people believe the injection is just giving a person COVID so that they have antibodies, now they are protected. So can we clarify what you're saying about that the vaccine is not actually you getting COVID, it's tricking your body into thinking it's getting COVID?
So a vaccine is obviously not disease causing. It looks like a virus or a bacteria, or it looks like a part of a virus or a bacteria that when the body sees, it thinks it's a bacteria or a virus, and it responds as it would normally respond if it saw a bacteria and a virus. So it is impossible for a vaccine, because they are not disease causing, specifically for COVID, to cause disease. I am saying specifically for COVID because there are different types of vaccines, and for COVID we do not have what we call live vaccines like we used to have for some conditions. So we do not have any of the COVID vaccines that are capable of causing disease or causing a real infection. They just trick the body into thinking that the foreign agent looks like a virus, and the body responds by producing antibodies which protect us in the event that a real virus comes our way, or we get exposed to a real virus.
And then just so we know, then that is preparing your body to create the necessary antibodies to fight off the real virus should you get it, therefore cushioning your blow. So it's not saying you're never going to get it. It's not a vaccine that's preventing you from getting the virus. It's better preparing your body to handle it should you get it.
Yes, particularly with these vaccines. Generally, vaccines may be created to prevent infection or to prevent disease. Depending on the efficacy of a vaccine. If it's got a very high efficacy and it's able to prevent infection, yes, it may do that. But generally, they tend to prevent disease occurring. So the infection still enters your body and your body still needs to respond, but the outcome of that encounter between the real infection and your primed immune system is that there will not be disease occurring, or if disease does occur, it will be very mild because you have enough immune response to dampen it and kill it before it causes damage. And that's important. That's how vaccines work.
Somebody had asked a question, if a person, this is from Zama 45, if a person already has the antibodies for COVID-19, why or is a vaccine required, and if so, why?
Yes, it is recommended. So with medicine generally is driven by evidence. And the evidence we have is that people who have been naturally infected and have natural antibodies do not necessarily have protection from subsequent infections. And we know this already. We have people who are infected in wave 1, in wave 2, and even in wave 3. So reinfection does occur. How a vaccine works is that it broadens the immune response that you have. Because the body, each time it encounters something foreign, it responds differently. It may respond by having many killer cells or many memory cells and different arms of the immune system. And if you train it using different means, be it natural infection and a vaccine, it then means the immune response that is formed in that person is broadened and is strengthened, because the immune system works best with reactivation or memory reactivation.
Okay, so to be clear, even if you've had, even if you've done the test to check if you've got antibodies and you've had COVID and you were completely asymptomatic, it's still advisable that you go and get vaccinated.
It is, to strengthen your immune response. Yes, it is still advisable to get the vaccine.
Somebody asked a question. I unfortunately missed the name and it's a bit far up to go, but they were asking which vaccine I got. I got Pfizer. So I did do a first and a second jab. My first and second jabs, both, I just had a sore arm. The second one was actually almost insignificant, but the pain is not unbearable, so that people know it's not this unbearable pain. But for somebody like myself who has quite a few injections regularly, it's more so than a normal jab site. So those are the only side effects that I experienced. So, doctor, I mean, many people are afraid of these adverse reactions where they get horribly ill for that period of time. Why should that not be a deterrent from getting the vaccine?
Okay. The biggest reason is that reaction is nothing compared to COVID itself, for starters. So the risk benefit is definitely the benefit outweighs the risk.
Yes.
That's very important. You were sorry. I need to reorganize my thinking. Are you asking the different
So as
types
in,
of?
because you already said, because many people hear about these adverse reactions of people getting very, very ill, right?
Okay. So maybe let's
what would
go
you
into.
say? Yeah, what would you say to those people that say, I'd rather they not get the vaccine?
Okay, so let's go into what is expected, what happens commonly, and what happens rarely. Okay, so what happens commonly, and remember, any side effect or adverse event where side effects fit in, that has been picked up during a clinical trial, it does not happen in 100% of people. So that's also important to know. Just because you are aware that there is a potential adverse reaction, it does not mean you will always get it. But there are those that occur more commonly because of the nature of a vaccine. And a vaccine is introduced using an injection, and anything that is invasive, like an injection, will cause pain. And that's a common side effect. So pain around the inoculation site is a typical event or reaction that occurs, and most of us get it after injection, because obviously it's invasive. And because the vaccine also works by triggering an immune response, most people's immune system will respond. And how does an immune system respond? It responds by causing a fever, because whenever the body temperature rises, it usually weakens any pathogen. So the body's innate, or the most crude way of responding to infection is increasing temperature. A fever is uncomfortable. A fever causes that discomfort. You get muscle aches, you may get some headaches and dizziness, and those are systemic side effects. So that happens commonly, and that is because of the nature of the agent that's being introduced. It's supposed to trigger that type of reaction. So that is what we would call an expected side effect that occurs frequently. You do get those adverse events that may not necessarily have been picked up during clinical trials. Remember, during clinical trials, you're probably testing 20, 40,000 people, and you will only pick up things that happen commonly. Sometimes there are adverse reactions that are severe and would not have been picked up during clinical trials. And these are picked up once a vaccine or a drug is rolled out at large numbers, in millions, like we currently have in the rollout of the vaccines. And those
and that's why it's so important then to report your symptoms.
So that is why there is this whole reporting mechanism that even the slightest, I had the vaccine, I had body aches, and I had pain on my arm. I reported that because it's important for that type of data to be collected, so that we know that really this is what happens commonly and this is what happens really. So those that may not have been picked up during the clinical trial stage, we usually say they present as a signal. So you start getting reports of somebody, what's the had, I don't want to use a medical term, but maybe had a convulsion,
yes,
a seizure, or somebody had, I'll use this one, a clot in their blood system. So those, when they are picked up, they are obviously thoroughly investigated, and part of the investigation is to firstly to determine if they really happened at the same time or are following a vaccine being administered, and if there is a direct or causal link that can be confirmed between this event and the type of reaction. And once that documentation is done, then it is added into the list of adverse events that would not have been picked up. And this is what is called vigilance or post-registration surveillance, so that we know things that may not have been picked up. And those tend to be very rare. So during this time, data is then is then collected prospectively to see when so many doses are given, how many people get this supposedly rare